Jennifer Sorensen. I am the campus director at Brightmont Academy Plymouth, and so excited for you all to join us today for our Brightmont Academy speaker series. Today we'll be talking about unmotivated teens. I bet no one has ever come across an unmotivated teen in their life. And our special guest is Mackenzie Nolan of Grounding Space Therapy. Um, Obviously, being here in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, we partner with different professionals in our therapeutic community, and we've known Mackenzie for quite a while and really appreciate how she can seemingly get through to reluctant teens. So, really excited to have her. Also, want to introduce my partner in crime, Michelle Platt. She's the campus director at our Mendota Heights campus. She'll wave.
Yeah.
She is she will be manning our chat today. So if you have questions as Mackenzie is presenting information, don't hesitate to put questions in chat. We'll try to get to those in real time. And thank you for your patience. We were working through a little bit of a technical issue, and now we are set to go. So with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Miss Mackenzie Nolan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk about this. This is a topic and like a population that I've kind of just honestly fallen into, but it's a population that I really enjoy working with, despite these teens really not presenting as very fun. Like Jenny said, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Minnesota. I have worked in in-home settings, in the schools. I've worked in community-based mental health, and I have worked with kids as young as 4, families, couples, all the things. But like I said, I've really fallen into this niche of working with these reluctant teens. Before we get started, I wanted to make 2 notes. One, that this topic is so complex, and this is just a very broad introduction. Like I'm gonna after this presentation, you're gonna walk away with some to-dos and not to-dos and probably the things that you're here for. But it is broad, and it could absolutely be talked about for more than just 1 hour. And the other note is that I switch between using the word unmotivated and reluctant. While they don't necessarily mean the same thing, I often find in my work that the reasoning behind those same behaviors are similar. Before I jump into like actually going through these slides, I was curious, either from Jenny or Michelle or anybody who's here watching, what does your unmotivated or reluctant teen look like? What are those behaviors that you're seeing that are a problem?
Sure. I can jump in just in what we see at Brightmont. I mean, we see kids who, hoodie up,
Yep.
maybe gets home from school right to the bedroom, like isolates a little bit or a lot of it. Um, and feels from a family perspective, feels like they're not really interested in being a part of the family. Those are some basic things that I see just in working with students here. Michelle, anything to add there?
Yeah, so I'm a mom of 2 teens. So my everyday morning is full of reluctant teens. But also what we see here, we do have a lot of kids who have school anxiety, that sort of thing. And a lot of parents come to us also when it comes to homework. They're just lots of micromanaging. So, we see it academics, social, really all over.
Absolutely. This is a topic that I've become really passionate about because it is such a family thing. It's not just the teenager, the kid, but it involves the whole family and can be really, really hard for everybody.
And Mackenzie, people are putting things in the chat. So, and I relate to this. So, Melissa is saying, I hear a lot of, I don't know, I don't care about seemingly everything. And then another person said, feeling like he's ignoring us when we ask him to do something. And so both of those are getting thumbs up.
Yep, definitely. And oh my goodness, how frustrating that can be as the parent, and to just feel like you can't, like, have nowhere to go with this. It's really tough.
Yeah, and another one, I'll just jump in because we're getting a lot of
Yeah,
chats. My daughter's
absolutely.
lonely, but won't join an after school club or lessons to meet her people. And then another, my reluctant teen also has school anxiety, lots of diligence keeping up with homework. What's the point? Not wanting to do small chores, etc.
Yeah, and we're hearing this back and forth of the like unmotivated and like almost um sad or depressed presenting and lonely as opposed to the more combative, punchy in the face kind of kids. Yeah. Very big difference. But like I said, I see a lot of similarities between these two groups. Interesting to see on and on in my work.
And someone says, it scares me when she says she doesn't see the point of education.
Absolutely.
So keep the chat going. This is great. And also, I'm sure a lot of parents see like reluctance towards them, but not towards things they enjoy, right? Or like around their peers. Like all of a sudden they need to be somewhere, they can do it.
Yes. All right. These things on this slide are the top things that I hear when I have new parents coming in. This would be on the initial inquiry of like, my kids avoiding responsibilities, they're keeping to themselves more. They're only interested in those things that they like and not interested in the things that they have to do. And just more and more pushback. And for some families, this is super like out of nowhere. And I hope I can shed a little bit of light of where this can come from sometimes. And there are so many possibilities here. All right. I know most of you already know like these are just some of the few areas where I see this reluctance in school avoidance, in attending therapy. The amount of teens that I've worked with that come in and they're like, yep, don't want to be here, just being forced. In extracurriculars, and sometimes you see that shift that they just go, they play soccer their whole lives and then they become a teen and they're just like, nope, not anymore. In socializing and friendships, that is one of the bigger red flags for me if they're starting to pull back from friendships. Um, Family time, I'm sure some of you might see your kid pulling back. They don't want to eat dinner with you anymore. They don't want to hang out with mom and dad. They don't want to hang out with siblings anymore. Um, it sometimes can go as far as parental estrangement. I hope to not see that so young, but it does happen sometimes. In homework, I know how frustrating that can be, and just generally rule following. Um, I've heard this sentiment of a personality switch from so many parents. And well, I can't explain that for every teen on this meeting. Like it is a real thing, and you do see it in so many families, and it can be so hard to watch your child struggle in that way, and so hard to know what to do when your teen is developing into this person that you don't know anymore. I want to get into what's normal, what is normal teen behavior, and we could go on and on and on about this. Um, there's so much to say about what is typical and what is not, but at the core, fluctuations in motivation are a part of this time for them. There's so many reasons for that, but it is just a part. And I know a few slides back, I had written on there, like, what is the problem? Because I mean, I'm sure we all go through these periods of time where we struggle with motivation and it's just a normal part of life. And that's not inherently a problem, but it's when those responsibilities are starting to be avoided, or if they're not going to school anymore, or if they're not able to stay respectful in the home, or if they can't manage that loneliness and like regulating their own emotions. Um, so yeah, fluctuations in motivation are normal. Um, and a lot of this is the classic puberty hormones going on. Um, I, for this presentation, I looked more and did some little looking around about puberty because I feel like it's been a long time since I've actually um, learned about it. And I found that puberty, and it is getting younger and younger, and this is something I hear in my work all the time, but puberty for some starts as young as 8 or 9. And it's not just 1 or 2 years and then bam, they're back to normal and they're back to being their respectful selves. but can sometimes last for 5 to 6 years. That is so long, especially in the grand scheme of their lives, to have at least like a third of their lives struggling with what's going on internally. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling sad. All of these different things. Um, this this was said to me in grad school, and I have recognized this pattern throughout my work with these teens, that these teens often revert back to their emotionally dysregulated toddler selves. And so that's why you're going to see those extra tantrums. That's why you're going to see this like need for more help to regulate, because they kind of have to. They kind of have to while their brains are working itself out. So of course, you're going to see a lot more selfishness. You're going to see the moodiness. Their brains aren't fully developed. And because of that, they're going to seem more selfish, like I said, feel like they're living in their own little bubble. I added this part of sleep in here, that their circadian rhythms are shifting to be later in the day. That's why your teen might want to stay up until 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. But yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about screens and video games, and there's a component of that too. But there is a real thing to say about their circadian rhythms are shifting. So you are going to see your teen wanting and needing to stay up a little bit later. And there's that shift in importance towards peers. As I mentioned previously, like there is that level of pulling back from family that is normal, but it's the degree to which your teens are pulling back from family. And that's something we really have to monitor. Yeah. And there's that strive to develop who they are and who they want to become during this time. So we want to foster that independence, foster that autonomy for them. Let's see.
I think it was just negative thinking people were saying, and social anxiety. Sure. So I think a lot of the things you're touching on, and ups and downs.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Yes. I'm sure you all want to talk about video games and screen time, and it might frustrate you that I'm starting with the benefits of the video games and screen time. I really find that there's a lack of understanding for parents, even for myself, like pretty young, but I didn't grow up with the same access to video games, screen time that teens do now. And it's really hard to understand at times, especially as a parent. You're watching your teen sometimes fully lean into their screens and only be interested in screens. And it's really hard to watch, but there are benefits to screen time. I wanted to include these slides about this because there is something to say about having that level of understanding and context for these things. The benefits of screen time could include the social aspect. I'm sure that's the one that everybody talks about the most, or that's what you hear from your teen, that they're playing with their friends. Why won't you let me play games with my friends or talk to my friends? It gives them that feeling of control and mastery of their lives. As far as coping goes, there's this level of escapism that video games and screen time provides for them. And I mean, escapism and distraction are absolutely ways that we can cope, and they can be beneficial, but they aren't all the time. So there's a balance. That's something you're going to hear me talk about a lot, is balance when it comes to video games, screen time, holding the benefits and the risks. Their dopamine reward system is activated when they're on their screens for a variety of reasons. And I'll get into like the ways that can lead to some addictive patterns as well. But video games, screen time, social media, all the things, gives them that sense of community. It lets them experiment with different ways of being while they're still in their little bubble of home. And that can be huge during this time. I've noticed as the years have gone on that if your child doesn't have access to video games, screen time, social media, it's starting to become more of a social deficit, which so many thoughts about that, but yeah. um, I was recently talking to a client, and this client is diagnosed with ADHD. And I heard about this sentiment of just like after meeting all of the demands of the day, of waking up immediately in the morning in the first hour of your day, having all of these decisions to make about what to wear, what to eat, when to walk out the door, what to pack in the backpack, which friends to reach out to before school. That's just the first hour. And then continuing on with your day, making decision after decision, and having 100 million things go on in their brain, having at the end of their school day even just an hour to scroll or watch a video or watch a show gives them that level of unwinding that, at least for this client, they couldn't replicate in the same way with anything else. Does that mean give your kids full access? No, but there is something to say for that benefit. To the risks. um, there are so many major risks here. And I'm not here to change your mind about what works for your family. But the biggest risk being that slippery slope into addictive habits. It really is easy for kids to get in that mindset, kids and teens to get into that mindset of, I need this to feel good. And of course, that's a problem despite all the risks. And there are some signs that your teen will probably be showing that show that they might be going into that addictive slippery slope of, if you are fighting about screen time and video games all the time, that seems like a problem. Not saying your kid has an addiction problem, but that seems like a problem if it is causing more harm than good, more conflict than not. Yeah, sleep difficulties. I know Brightmont had a speaker not too long ago that talked about the blue light aspect of being on screens and how that can cause some sleep difficulties. There is an increased opportunity for criticism, both for themselves and from peers. And the risk of harm, I could go on a big tangent of the interaction that teens are having with strangers online and how harmful that can be. It is pretty drastic at times, the things that I hear, and scary. So, like I said, I'm not here to change your mind about screens, but I do think there is a big thing to say about balance. I'm a huge advocate for balance when it comes to screen time and video games, and allowing yourself to hold both of those things. At this point, like I said, going the opposite way and not allowing screens at all can cause those social deficits that can carry with them for very long. Those benefits of screen time I'll back up. I hear a lot from parents that, like, I know there's benefits to the screen time, but they can get all those things in other ways. And that's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. And the risks most of the time can be combated with monitoring and limits. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to tell you what works for your family, like I said, but the risks and benefits absolutely can work together and find a good balance between the two. Yeah.
Hey, Mackenzie, I just want to mention something here too. Like, I know you don't want to be too prescriptive, but like when you're thinking about monitoring or trying to reduce, or at least trying to find your family's balance, one of the things we hear a lot from the therapeutic community is just get the screens out of the bedroom. No screens in the bedroom or in the private areas of the house. Like, have that be done in a public area of the home. So when you have somebody who's maybe isolating, or, they're taking up a lot of their time with this activity, at least they're doing it not in an isolated place. You can see what's going on. You can overhear the conversation. So I think that's kind of an easy first step. If you feel like your balance is not balanced, just getting screens out of the room. And that also, coincides with good sleep hygiene, right? Not having screens in the bedroom is what every, therapist and or sleep specialist will say the first thing to do is get screens out of the room. So just something to think about there.
Absolutely. Um, I'll definitely talk more in depth about this later on too, but modeling those behaviors you want to see when it comes to screens. If you don't want your child to be on screens during dinner time, your screen should also be away. If you don't want them to be on screens the last hour or two before bedtime, your screen should be away. If you want them to learn more ways of coping without screens, show them how, model it for them. I'm going to speed on past this one kind of because I don't want you to diagnose your child on your own. But here are some very common things we see in the therapeutic setting for this reluctance in teens. We've got depression, anxiety, trauma or PTSD, fear, self-esteem struggles, laziness. Honestly, the biggest one I hear in the therapeutic setting is feeling unheard, um, neurodivergence, ADHD, autism, learning disabilities, feeling that lack of control, lack of autonomy, having a wrong fit provider, whether that's a mental health provider or in the wrong fit setting, which could be a school potentially, or struggles with peers. If any of these things are things you suspect, especially those diagnosable things like neurodivergence and depression, anxiety, even PTSD, get your kid tested. The wait lists are long, put them on the list. You don't have to end up going through with it. But if these are things you suspect, absolutely having those diagnoses. They're not the most important thing in the world always, but when you're looking for supports, they could be really, really helpful. I'm going to keep myself from going on a huge tangent about PDA and ODD, but I did think they're important to bring into this presentation a bit. This is just my observation, of course, but when I was working in settings where most of my caseload was lower income or teens of color, I saw most of them with these behaviors already come into the therapy room with an oppositional defiant disorder diagnosis. Because I've seen this bias over and over again, I have let myself do a little bit of a deep dive with some of these clients that have come to me with this diagnosis and have found that most of the time there is another explanation that I can find. Not always. And let me preface, like, this is a diagnosis in the DSM-5, which is this big book of diagnoses that mental health therapists and evaluators use to give diagnoses. So it is a valid diagnosis, but I often find that there are other reasons for it. When working in the school settings, not with Brightmont, of course, but when working in the school settings, I have had a special education teacher say to me directly that, oh man, if this kid has been given the EBD diagnosis or an ODD diagnosis, I just know they're trouble. And it was almost alluded to me in the way that they couldn't be helped. And of course, I have a big problem with that. So just something to keep in mind if your child has been given an ODD diagnosis. Yeah, open yourself up to other options. Find some supports that are willing to question that a little bit. I also wanted to include PDA on this slide. It might seem a little odd to include them together, which PDA is pathological demand avoidance. It is not a diagnosis in the DSM, and most of the research on it has been in the UK and Australia, and it just in the last few years has been starting to make its way into the US. And there's now starting to be more providers who are specializing in working with kids with PDA, but it's still not super widely talked about. And it's not a DSM diagnosis. But I wanted to include these on the same slide because I often see that those kids who have a PDA profile come to me already diagnosed with ODD. ODD, it says here, is a pattern of avoidance and demands and expectations that activates a fight or flight response and extreme emotional reaction. to me, how I've seen this in the therapeutic setting, it is tantrums, emotional outbursts, power struggles up the wazoo, like actually, like all the time. Um, and as I kind of described earlier, it's this if you're making all these decisions over and over again in a day, these kids with a PDA profile get to the point in their day where they're just like burnt out. And so they get to that point where the only thing they can do is fight or shut down or tantrum to ease that buildup of the full day. Here are some signs that it's more than just laziness. Like, is that a possibility here that your kid is just lazy? Totally, but not the case that I find most of the time. Chronic avoidance, significant mood swings, more than just the normal typical teenage mood swings. Changes in sleep or appetite. Maybe there's more nightmares. Maybe they're not able to sleep for long periods of time. Maybe they're not able to unwind their brains to go to sleep. If they're changing how much they eat, whether that's one way or the other, that's a problem. They're starting to withdraw from friends. It's long lasting. Which let me just make the note before I ask Jenny or Michelle to talk about school avoidance for a little bit. Long lasting or pervasive looks different for every family and situation. For some, this could be a month. For others, this could be a year. It really depends on your teen. It really depends on what's going on. And it depends on the severity. Going back to that chronic avoidance, Jenny, you want to talk about school avoidance?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do, I mean, I think school avoidance definitely falls into this category. And Mackenzie makes a good point, like whatever the norm for your kid was, it's when things are out of whack that you should be concerned. It's more than just typical teen behavior. We work with a lot of students who avoid school for a wide variety of reasons. And I think one of the things we see is, there's something going on within them or externally within the environment that makes it very hard for them to engage in school. So it's easier to not engage. It's easier to pull back. It's easier to stay in the safe space of their home or with their family. So I think, if you get to a place where you now are also working through school, you are also dealing with school avoidance, that's obviously setting off alarm bells. And just know, there are schools like Brightmont that kind of specialize in how to bring students back into the fold in terms of attending school again. So those are things that we can do very differently than a traditional school in terms of bringing students back a few days a week or a few hours a day. And it's something that we can really work with on an individual basis.
Absolutely. Something really cool that I've learned about Brightmont is that they aren't a forever solution for some of their students. Like, I hear a lot of parents get really freaked out, I'll say, of the idea of having to switch settings or switch providers or make a change. And it doesn't have to be a permanent change that's happening.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes it's just, what a student needs for a few months or a semester, and we can work through that. So I think, just like anything, it's what's your biggest challenge and how can you find the right resources and care team to help resolve that challenge. So
Absolutely. Next slide.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in also. I love that you're like putting all these things together because I think finding, like Jenny just said, the right team is so important, right? So like, for example, a child with ADHD probably has like some sort of sleep issue, might have, a gaming addiction or, more likely, to do that. And I think it all just comes together. So you're dealing with this profile. It's a complicated profile, right? And so you can't self-diagnose. And even though you feel like, oh, it's just being a moody teen, there's just so many different ways it's nuanced, right? Depending on their needs. And also what you said, like a full day could be daunting for a lot of these kids. So again, what we're doing is a shortened day, so they're coming and we ease kids in, but the goal is always, what's the parent's goal? Are we getting you back to your school, or are you staying here and this is a good, safe place? But I think that long day for a lot of kids, especially when they're dealing with this, is hard, right? And it prolongs things sometimes.
Absolutely. We're almost there. We've almost made it to the what can we do? This is self-determination theory. And this is something that I just use in my work to like assess. I don't often talk about this with families, but sometimes. Um, Self-determination theory is one of the many theories of motivation that exist within the whole psychology field. This one is specifically a theory of intrinsic motivation. If you're unaware of what intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is, I know what it sounds like. Intrinsic motivation is being motivated from within for personal satisfaction, enjoyment, etc. And extrinsic motivation is being motivated by an external reward or punishment. We often see those younger kids more motivated for the getting the sticker at the end of the doctor's appointment, as opposed to like, I did it, yay. So an example of that would be a child continues to play hockey because they want to win the medal, they want to win the trophy at the end, versus they continue to play because it brings that sense of accomplishment or satisfaction or even fun. And I will say these things can work together, and they often do. And I think with teens, we're still seeing this back and forth of what can work. So, though self-determination theory definitely prioritizes the intrinsic side, your teen might need more of those extrinsic external motivators here. But self-determination theory states that human beings have three basic needs. And I think these three basic needs align very much with this idea that teens are trying to figure out who they are, who they want to become, what does their adult lives look like. They've got all this pressure of all these adults telling them they need to figure out what comes next. So these three basic needs are competence. As it says, people need to gain mastery and control of their own lives and their environment. They need to feel autonomy. They need to feel in control of their own lives, behaviors, and goals. And relatedness, especially we see this with peers. Your teens aren't trying to relate to you necessarily all the time. They want to relate to peers. And if they don't feel like they can, they're going to pull back.
And Mackenzie,
right.
I don't know if you're going to get to this after, or but people are asking about, and maybe you're getting to this, how do I foster intrinsic motivation for my child? And then is there a list of, someone else asked, is there a list of external motivators that I can try, not motivated by things she can think of, grades, money, treats, excursions, so needing ideas. So maybe you're going to get to all these.
I don't have a list with me right now, but I could throw some out there in a little bit. But I do get into how to foster the intrinsic motivation a little bit. I'm going to start with the what not to do's here. These can be kind of frustrating as a parent to hear. I don't want to criticize you as a parent. It's to make things feel maybe a little easier for you, minimize the power struggle, maybe increase the potential for that relationship to stay close, and just generally reduce harm. But I talk to parents of a wide variety, some who come on a little too strong and want to helicopter it a little bit, and some who are like, hands off, I don't know what to do here. So we're going to start with the what not to do's, and then we're going to get into to do's. So number one, nagging. We can't be nagging our kids. I know for my own self, if I'm nagged, I'm not gonna listen to that very much. And your teens are the same way. They're gonna dig their heels into the ground and keep going. The second one, rescuing. The amount of parents that complete their kids' homework for them. Please don't do that. It doesn't help them. I understand there's this level of wanting to help them succeed and still maintain, whether that's a social benefit or maintain the grades that they have. But this doesn't help them motivate, doesn't help them feel that level of internal motivation. Telling them what they need to be motivated for. your teens, like I said, the biggest thing they're going through right now is trying to figure out who they want to become and who they want to be. And if you tell them what they need to be motivated for, I often see these teens pull back. Um, Making comparisons to others, that includes yourself. The classic, um, I didn't act like this when I was your age, really stops these teens in their tracks, especially comparing them to siblings or same age peers can be a real hit to self-esteem. There are so many like preteen to teen boys that I have worked with, and I say boys specifically, I don't know why that's the pattern, that come in with this major self-esteem hit. And it's really hard to work through. And it's not always, and I would say most often, it's not because of what parents are saying, but they're just in this kind of sensitive period of time for themselves. And so whenever they have these people to compare themselves to, they start to, and then they internalize it, and it tends to build. Um, Dismissing their interests. Yeah, I'm going to get into how you can get into their interests with them in the next slide, but dismissing their interests, once again, dig their heels into the ground, and overemphasizing the result at the expense of effort. This kind of goes hand in hand with rescuing, but telling them that they need to get straight A's as opposed to working hard. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure some of your teens take advantage of that if you give them that level of grace and understanding. But I think if they're putting all they can, and it's like working so hard, and there's still not enough, it really hits their self-esteem and makes it harder to crawl back out from. Alrighty, this first slide, what to do. I really want to encourage all of you to start shifting your mindset. And I know you see those words, lower your expectations, and are probably like, what do you mean? Why? Because you don't want to lower your expectations. You want your kids to succeed. And I want that for your kids too. And I think, especially when these teens are trying to figure out who they are and who they want to become, they really struggle to see that your expectations are, I don't know a great way to put this, but see that your expectations are reality, and see that your expectations are things that they need to strive for, because they are still trying to figure out what it is they want. I really like this, like nurturing motivation, not giving it to them. And in the next slide, we get into how. But yeah, we don't want to give them motivation by telling them. I think this is where that external motivators come in more, is saying you should be motivated because you're going to get an A, or you can go to the best college, or all these things. That might not be what they want. Shifting your mindset and modeling a growth mindset. And I don't know how familiar you are. Whoa, I don't know how familiar you all are with a growth versus fixed mindset. But I found this little image online, and I thought it was a really good example. The biggest one that I hear all the time is, I can't do it. Shifting that to a growth mindset of, I'm still learning and I'll keep trying. This is so difficult to watch your child struggle. And I often hear parents just break down because their kids are struggling, or they're not meeting the expectations of getting an A or succeeding in even the most basic of ways that it sounds like. But you are not a failure if your kid is struggling. You are not a failure if your kid is not achieving the same successes as you.
Hey, Mackenzie, can I jump right there? I think one of the things
Absolutely.
that we always, kind of to put an exclamation point on that last slide, is focus on progress, not perfection,
Yep.
right? Just let's get a little better every day, or a little better every week. And I think, when you're in a really tough place, that's hard. You want the solution and you want to get there. So I think this idea of like modeling a growth mindset and setting up, baby goals, and what are we going to do for the next 7 days? While it seems like so practical and easy to do, it's not easy. And I think we want to acknowledge that too.
Absolutely. It is so hard to continuously fight with your kid, watch your kid feel that loneliness, as I saw earlier in the chat. Like it can be heartbreaking. And it's heartbreaking to feel like you have all these, like I'm coming in with a few solutions and you could try all of them and still see just little baby progress. And that's still, it takes you down as a parent. But like Jenny said, progress over perfection. All right, what to do? Praise the small wins. In couples therapy, there's a really popular homework assignment from the Gottman method called Building a Culture of Appreciation. And this is what I want for your family. I don't want this to just be a couples thing. I want this to be a whole family thing. What that means is noticing what things are going well, calling them out. This could look like um, praising them and giving them compliments that don't necessarily require them, like meeting the most basic of expectations, like starting from scratch. If your child's really struggling to get dressed in the morning, giving them the compliment of, I'm so proud of you for picking out your outfit for school and getting ready. Or I'm so proud of you for getting your homework done. I'm so glad you pushed yourself to get to hockey practice today. I know how hard that can be after a long day at school. Um, Next, help them promote autonomy. That would be encouraging them to practice their independence, whether that's online, whether that's going out socially, whether that's just asking them what they need. You would be so surprised. I know most of you are asking your children what they need, but you'd be so surprised how many teens will come to therapy and then tell me what they need when they haven't even said these same things to their parents. But allowing that space, continuing honestly to push to ask them what their needs and give them the opportunity to tell you. Create some buy-in and show them that you care. This is my favorite one because I think it can be the most fun for the teens. Participate in their hobbies with them. Ask them about the things that are bringing them that level of motivation, the things that keep bringing them joy. Asking things like, I'll go with the video game route. Asking things like, what's the game you've been playing with your friends the most lately? What what do you like about it? Maybe even ask them if they're willing to teach you. And if they are open to it, maybe pushing in, like if they're really interested in games, lean into board games, something that maybe you're more interested in. Try to find that middle ground to connect with your kid. Goal setting goes a really, really in line with helping them promote autonomy. I'm just going to start out with the only motivation for a teen's goal should not be to make you happy. It should not. And I think a lot of teens go into therapy and I hear like, I'm coming here just to make mom happy. And I have to get an A. I'm putting so much pressure on myself because I'm trying to make my parents proud of me. And it does kind of the opposite. But helping them goal set by prioritizing their goals. I don't know if you're all familiar with SMART goals, but that's a really easy way to start of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Help them set goals that they can actually achieve without telling them what those goals need to be. It's really hard to widen the lens a little bit here, but I think that's what needs to be done most of the time. Of if you want them to, like if your goal as a parent is to get them to graduate high school, right? Widening the lens could look like making that smaller goal more attainable for them, asking what is their SMART goal to get through ninth grade. What are those tiny little baby steps to get to this bigger picture? Because teens also, they jump into this mindset of like, man, I have 4 more years left. Oh my goodness, if you're struggling with motivation, 4 more years of high school sounds terrible. Widen the lines for them, help them widen that lens. Set screen time limits. Like I said, can't tell you what works for your family. But like Jenny said, there's easy ways to start. That could be keeping phones out of the bedroom. That could be starting with taking screens away 30 minutes before bedtime as opposed to the 1 or 2 hours that's recommended. That could be having family screen time as opposed to individual screen time. Tons of different options here. Minimize the power struggle, much easier said than done. But I see it a lot that parents are fighting with their kids in the same way their siblings, like the sibling sets, are fighting. Don't let yourself get wrapped up in this power struggle that resembles this. If your teen cannot seem to have a conversation in a regulated, respectful manner, show them how. Be that model for talking respectfully to one another. Teach them how to communicate their wants and needs in respectful ways that are more easily understood. A part of minimizing the power struggle is following through on consequences. Don't say that you're going to take their phone away if you're not going to take their phone away.
I think there's a really good comment in the chat right now that kind of relates to everything you're talking about. But, one of the things you mentioned was like asking your kid, what do they need, right? What if their answer is like, nothing, get out of my face, leave me alone. Like, I don't want anything. What do you do then? Like you're kind of handcuffed into their controlling
Absolutely.
the situation.
Absolutely. That is a dynamic that I see often. And I think part of that is going to be widening your lens as the parent, doing all these modeling behaviors, and honestly realizing there's a little bit longer of a road ahead than you want, which is disappointing to hear. But I think that is the situation when your kid is not willing to open up for you. Widen the lens by bringing in more supports, whether that's bringing in an aunt, extended family, bringing in a therapist, having the school come in, widening your support network a little bit can often be helpful when your kid is already at that shutdown stage. Sure, is that going to push them to maybe shut down a little bit more in the beginning? Potentially. But I think there's this, back to the word balance here, of pushing and letting them try their independence out a little bit.
Mackenzie, in that situation, do you ever like advise parents to try to like schedule like a weekly time to have conversations, or, if it's they need that autonomy and they need to be left alone for whatever reasons they feel they need
Absolutely.
to do that. Do you ever say like, okay, well, let's move then to having, you know, we have a
Sunday
relationship.
business meeting.
Right.
Yep. Sunday business meeting where it's a non-negotiable that you guys are going to talk about those hard things. Or even giving them different ways to do it, like to talk about these things, which might include screens, which could be texting, different platforms to talk about their emotions. One of the families I had worked with in the past had created this idea on their own, and I really love it, of having a bathroom shared journal where whenever they're sitting on the toilet for a long period of time, there's a pen and a journal in there where they can write to each other about some of those big things that they're working through on their own.
The bathroom piece is interesting. I have
Yeah,
heard of like a mom and son or mom and daughter journal where, it can go back and forth, and it's like if you really want to say, if you really need to express yourself but you can't do it right now, or you can't do it verbally, it's a nice way to kind of bounce things back and forth. But I think, a lot of parents do get that, like they're engaging, they're trying, and they get such a level of pushback that they're like, I don't know what else I can do. So what you're really saying is broaden your network, bring in more professionals, bring in a different trusted adult. I'll say even at Brightmont, even when students engage with us, whether it's in a full-time capacity or a tutoring capacity, just having another person that's kind of an expert in academics saying the same thing the parent says, they listen to the non-parent
yep,
every time. So, kind
absolutely.
of engaging those other people can be really helpful. But I do love like a standing meeting, or a different way of communicating. Maybe, maybe it is we're gonna text about this, but I think that's where sometimes, our need for that in-person communication has to be rethought a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are, go for
Oh,
it.
I was going to ask, have you heard of, there's this book called 14 Talks by Age 14? Do you know
I
this?
have not.
And it's all just interesting ways to have conversations with your kids. And like once your kids drive, you kind of lose this. But like car rides is just kind of like, I think, a big time. And you notice once your kid drives that you don't have that time anymore, you know? But it is kind of interesting. And what Jenny was saying, yeah, I think we had a speaker recently and she was saying, I think it almost went back and forth like a Post-it note, like I need to talk to you about something, you know, and that kid would not say they need to speak, but they would eventually leave a Post-it, like when, and they would schedule a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, this probably isn't what you all want to hear, but there are some teens that just will refuse. They don't want to talk about it with their parent. And in that scenario, it's encouraging them to use their tools that they have and holding them accountable in that way. So if they don't want to talk to you as the parent about these things, doing a meeting where you're checking in on who are you talking to? What coping tools are you using during this time? As opposed to, I hear parents say the words forced fun or things like that all the time. And yeah, that doesn't always work. My last thing, don't give up. Like you guys, like in your own families, you have these ways of doing things and ways of being that are probably pretty set. And whenever you try something new, as you know, your teen is going to push back immediately. Keep it consistent. The biggest things are consistency and safety during these times. Keep it consistent. Know there's a risk for pushback. That's when you're trying something new, but keep going, keep trucking along. Where to go if you're stuck and need more help? I'll briefly go over this. Therapy, always an option. Something I didn't put on here is OT. I find a lot of families utilize occupational therapy and or even physical therapy for those kids that really are not emotional communicators, and that can really help get into that somatic space for them. For therapy, there's groups, there's individual therapy, there's family therapy. Parents, get your own therapy. It can be really helpful. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of coaching. Like I mentioned before, getting your kid on a wait list for neuropsych testing and utilize your school. Please utilize your schools. Does your kids need accommodations? Do they need an IEP or a 504 plan? Do they need to make shifts in how they show up in their school day? Um, Here's my contact info, and Jenny and Michelle, go for it.
Hey, absolutely. Well, Mackenzie, thank you. I think this is a, important topic. It's a varied topic, and we have parents who are participating today that, it's everything from kind of like typical teen pushback to something a lot more serious. So I think there were a lot of great questions in chat. Thank you all for participating. I'm going to move to the next slide, Michelle. And with that, I just want to share with you, obviously, as part of our speaker series, we talk just a little bit about Brightmont here at the end. We offer a very wide array of services. So you can see those on the screen. Michelle and I are happy to take questions via our email addresses, phone call, here in chat, whatever you're comfortable with, if you have questions about how we're set up. We have over 20 campuses in, I think, 9 or 10 states now, so we're not everywhere, but we are a one-to-one school. So everything we do is one-to-one, everything from full-time to part-time, maybe 1 or 2 classes or individual courses, all the way down to skill building programs where we're filling a specific need, down to tutoring. So with that, that's just a little bit about us. We work with school avoiders a lot. We work with kids struggling with mental health a lot. Kids with different learning differences, kids who are experiencing times of transition. Could be something going on in the family, etc. Medically sensitive kids. So we have kids that gifted, tons of different reasons why Brightmont is a good fit for them. And with that, we want to leave you in this slide with our contact information. Hopefully, if you attended today and you could take away a couple kernels. I know a lot of people liked that visual of growth mindset. A lot of people, were things that came up in chat that we were able to address as we were moving through. So I think, hopefully at least you are able to kind of come away with one or two things you could be implementing or doing. And, Mackenzie's information is here, so feel free to contact her as well. Michelle, any other last words?
Yeah, no, I would just add, I think you did a great job, Mackenzie. I think
Yeah,
this is
thank
really
you.
helpful. And sometimes it's small things. So like we were saying, sometimes we provide an adult they can come to. So just small things that we have families doing, like even tutoring. Like our tutoring, our teachers are also our tutors, the same people who are teaching full time. So sometimes it's just, what, I'm not going to nag you about homework. Just you're going to do your homework here, everything, a lot of executive function. And then we also have an executive functioning program called ECHO. And a lot of this is just building autonomy and confidence. And then one last thing I think both of us have noticed too, when like our students, especially high school, get involved with volunteering, or getting a job, those sometimes that really even changes like their mindset, where it just kind of builds like this confidence. And yeah, I think all the questions were there, but everything is going to be sent to you. And if you have follow-up questions, you can, contact us here, and everything, the deck and everything is sent to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mackenzie, thanks for your time. For everyone participating today, thanks for your time. We appreciate your participation. It was a great chat today. Sometimes the chat just kind of sits silent on webinars. So thank you all for your participation and have a wonderful Thursday. Thanks all.